Catherine Hale's story began in an ordinary neighborhood, but there was nothing ordinary about her attitude toward life. From the beginning, she carried herself as if the rules that governed everyone else were beneath her. Teachers remembered her as the student who always found ways around assignments, not by working harder, but by cutting corners. As she grew older, this mindset hardened into a belief that she was smarter than the world, and therefore not bound by the same restrictions. By the time she was an adult, she had made a habit of ignoring fines, breaking community rules, and shrugging off warnings from authorities. Neighbors noticed her indifference, but most dismissed it as arrogance rather than the foundation of something darker. Catherine learned quickly that people rarely questioned confidence, and she wielded hers like a weapon. She drove luxury cars without paying the proper taxes, forged documents to bypass regulations, and walked into exclusive spaces as if she belonged. Every time she got away with another stunt, her conviction grew stronger that the system was flawed and powerless against her. What started as petty defiance soon evolved into calculated schemes. She began experimenting with fake names to open small accounts, testing how far she could go before anyone noticed. When no one did, Catherine realized she could stretch her boundaries endlessly. This discovery thrilled her. It was as if she had found a secret path through society, invisible to ordinary eyes. Her actions were no longer about convenience, they were about dominance, about proving to herself that she truly stood above Americans and their laws. It was this hunger for superiority that set her on a dangerous path, one that would transform a defiant woman into a mastermind of crime, hidden in plain sight. Catherine Hale's ambitions expanded far beyond small tricks and minor frauds. Once she realized how easy it was to manipulate paperwork and identities, she began crafting entire businesses designed to deceive. Her first attempt was a travel agency that promised luxury vacations at discounted prices. Glossy brochures, a professional-looking website, and charming sales pitches convinced clients to hand over large sums of money. The trips never existed. By the time complaints surfaced, Catherine had already closed the agency and moved the stolen money into hidden accounts. This early success gave her the confidence to go bigger. Soon, she created real estate companies that sold homes she never owned, collecting deposits from eager families before disappearing with their savings. Each new scam was more elaborate than the last, and with every success, her belief in her own invincibility deepened. Catherine did not simply steal, she built illusions. She staged charity fundraisers with glamorous venues, raising tens of thousands of dollars for victims of natural disasters, only to funnel every cent into offshore accounts. What made her so dangerous was her ability to appear genuine. She dressed elegantly, spoke with authority, and surrounded herself with respectable acquaintances, ensuring suspicion rarely touched her. Investors and donors believed they were dealing with a woman of class and vision, not realizing they were feeding a criminal empire. Authorities caught glimpses of her schemes, but her trail was difficult to follow. She constantly shifted identities, closed businesses before investigations began, and resurfaced with new ventures in different states. To those who saw her from a distance, she was a successful entrepreneur. To those she deceived, she was a ghost who left behind financial ruin. And to herself, Catherine was unstoppable, convinced she had mastered the art of living above the law. The unraveling of Catherine Hale's carefully constructed empire began with a detail so small it might have been overlooked by anyone less attentive. An accountant, reviewing charitable donations intended for storm victims, noticed that the funds never reached the organizations listed in the reports. Instead, the money traveled through a maze of accounts that circled back to shell companies with no clear purpose. The deeper the review went, the more irregularities surfaced, all leading toward Catherine's growing network of businesses. For years, she had managed to operate under the radar by spreading her schemes across states and hiding behind layers of fabricated identities, but now investigators had a thread to pull. As federal agencies began to follow the money, a disturbing picture emerged. Millions of dollars had vanished from causes that people trusted, from families saving for homes, and from investors hoping for safe returns. Despite this, Catherine's confidence did not waver. She flaunted wealth openly, stepping out in designer clothes, hosting lavish parties, and traveling to exotic destinations. The extravagance drew attention from journalists and watchdog groups who began asking how one woman could fund such a lifestyle. What once protected her, her arrogance and confidence, was now turning into a beacon for suspicion. Investigators who had once struggled to connect her scams suddenly found a flood of evidence linking her various operations together. Whispers about her empire reached victims across the country, and more people came forward with stories of betrayal. Catherine, however, still believed she was untouchable. To her, every question from the authorities was nothing more than noise. Yet behind the scenes, the walls were closing in, and the cracks in her empire were no longer repairable. The woman who had once thrived in shadows was finally stepping into the light of exposure. Federal authorities moved with precision when the time came to dismantle Catherine Hale's empire. After months of surveillance, financial tracing, and witness interviews, they launched simultaneous raids on her properties. Luxury cars were towed away, safes were cracked open, and entire rooms filled with counterfeit documents were seized as evidence. For many, it seemed like the end of her reign, but Catherine was not ready to accept defeat. Even as the reality of her arrest set in, she carried herself with the same icy confidence that had always shielded her. She secured a team of high-profile lawyers, determined to argue that the government was overreaching and targeting her unfairly. The trial that followed became a national spectacle, drawing reporters, victims, and curious onlookers who wanted to see the woman who had fooled so many. Inside the courtroom, a parade of witnesses told harrowing stories of financial ruin, families left homeless after paying deposits on non-existent homes, travelers stranded at airports when their dream vacations vanished, and donors outraged that their generosity had been stolen. Documents, bank records, and testimonies painted a damning picture, yet Catherine sat with unshaken composure, as though the proceedings were beneath her. She projected the same aura of superiority she had always relied upon, dismissing evidence as lies and insisting she was being framed. The media framed her as both a mastermind and a symbol of unchecked greed, sparking debates about how someone could manipulate the system for so long. Prosecutors methodically tore apart her defense, showing that every dollar, every signature, every company led back to her. When the verdict finally arrived, guilty on multiple counts of fraud, embezzlement, and tax evasion, spectators expected shock or regret. Instead, Catherine offered only a cold stare, convinced even in defeat that she was still beyond the reach of ordinary judgment. Catherine Hale's sentencing marked the end of her freedom but not the end of her story. She was handed decades in a federal prison, a punishment meant to serve as justice for the countless lives she had devastated. Yet even as she was led away in handcuffs, Catherine refused to bow her head. In her mind, prison was not a consequence of her actions but proof that the world was envious of her intelligence and success. She entered the correctional system with the same arrogance that had defined her life, immediately setting herself apart from the other inmates. She refused to join rehabilitation programs, declined work assignments, and scoffed at the rules that governed daily prison life. Her attitude earned her isolation, but Catherine welcomed it, convinced she was superior to everyone around her. Her presence behind bars became a subject of fascination outside prison walls. Documentaries, news features, and books explored how she had managed to build such a vast criminal empire while appearing untouchable for so long. Victims watched these stories with mixed feelings, some satisfied that justice had finally caught up with her, others bitter that their losses could never truly be repaired. For law enforcement, her case became a textbook example of how arrogance and charm can mask criminal intent. Even in confinement, Catherine clung to her belief that she had been wronged. She often told fellow inmates that her downfall was not due to her crimes but to a flawed system incapable of handling someone of her intelligence. This refusal to accept responsibility ensured she never found redemption. Instead, she became a symbol of caution, a reminder that no matter how cleverly someone manipulates the system or how untouchable they feel, the law eventually closes in. Catherine's empire of deception was gone, but her legacy lived on as a chilling tale of pride, greed, and the illusion of being above the law.